few minutes early. Probably some more folks pop in. And we're so glad that you're here today. It's a pleasure to have some gentlemen as our guests today. This is Pastor McQueen, and we'll tell you more about him in the morning service. And also Jody, a fellow from his church. Yes. And we're glad to have both of these guys. So cut them a little slack if they seem a little tired or whatnot, because they got here at midnight last night. They flew into Vegas, made a mad dash up here. I don't know, when I was talking on the phone, and I says, now when you get to Vegas, it's 4 hours, plus you lose the hour. And I could almost hear in his voice like, oh, like that's a ways, but that's okay. We're glad you're here, and we hope you feel right at home there. Hello, Peter. Come on in. They're saving you one up, a couple of them up front here. Yeah. So, that's a good thing. Yeah. Well, they thought you were speaking, so that's why they.
Well, all right.
So that did it right there. So before we get started with the lesson this morning, Acts and Facts is a little magazine that Institute for Creation Research puts out. That's the same folks that publish the devotional Days of Praise that many of you use and read. And so I think it's monthly or bi-monthly, every other month, maybe monthly. Anyhow, this caught my attention. There's an article about Zion National Park, right in our backyard, huh? Evidence of deep water sand waves. So there's an article, several pages long, of how what you see over there did not come from eons of time. It doesn't have the evidence of it, but rather comes from a catastrophic amount of water coming through in a short amount of time. And of course, I think I told you last week, I'll see if you remember what kind of lights that Noah had on the ark. Floodlights, that's right. So the first one that gets this can take it home and read it, the article, and then bring it back, and we'll circulate it around if you want to read it. It's not real long read, but it's really a good one. Let's go to Revelation chapter number 8. Get started right in on this. Our times always seem short, so get started in. We'll be showing you in the morning service some video clips and pictures of a barn lowering. You've heard of barn raisings. We had a barn lowering on Thursday. Took that old horse shed barn out, and we'll show you about that. Appreciate those 8 guys that came out. And I was thinking, well, we probably schedule a couple days. They had it done in a couple hours. So they don't mess around. So we all knew that. Revelation chapter 8. We are in this series, just simply entitled The Revelation of Jesus Christ. And here's our chart. By the way, this is an interesting, the meme, is that what they call it, that comes through? Guy's getting out of the casket. I forgot my phone. Isn't that, we leave the house and all of a sudden, I got to go back. I forgot my phone. Oh, it's tools. There's always something. But I don't think you're coming back, because where you went, if you're a believer, is so much better than what you would come back to. But man, you guys, you must have got a good rest last night. You're on. This is our chart for Revelation that we're studying, and we are right here, chapter number 8. So if you'll find that, we're going to talk about the heavens smitten, the fourth of the trumpet judgments. Remember, there are 7, 7, 7. There's 6 seal, and then the 7th seal introduces the 7 trumpet judgments, and there's 6 of those, and the 7th one introduces the vial judgments, and on through. So I'll kind of keep that up there, because we're going to be looking at this first, second, and third woe in a bit here. And so let's go. And we're on trumpet number 3, and this is going to be verses 10 and 11 in Revelation chapter 8. I hope all of us are getting a lot out of this. This is always an interesting study for people, and you kind of, I always go back and forth between, do I want to slow it way down so we get it all, or get it done before it actually starts happening? There's that sense of urgency. I want you all to know by the time it happens what was going on. So I don't know. We'll just take our time in the Lord. He'll fill us in on anything we don't get here. Amen. So verse number 10, 11, and the third angel sounded, and there fell a great star from heaven, burning as it were a lamp, and it fell upon the third part of the rivers, and upon the fountains of water, And the name of the star is called Wormwood. And the third part of the waters became wormwood. And many men died of the waters because they were made bitter. So you can see, obviously, trumpet number 3 is the great star falls on this. This is going to affect what we think of as the freshwater supply at this point. This is another celestial body that comes. You'll see there's a lot of falling in these trumpet judgments. The first one up in verse 7, there was cast upon the earth, hail and fire mingled with blood was cast upon the earth. Trumpet number 2, there was a great mountain burning with fire that was cast into the sea. And so what we have here is a great star that here again fell from heaven to earth as being casted a sense. And you're going to see the same thing as we go on through some of these other ones here. This star is called Wormwood. Now, this is not the first star that's named in the Bible. There are some other stars that are named. Job has some of those that were named. But the word wormwood here means a bitterness. And obviously that's the effect that it had. In fact, God knows not only the names of all the stars, but he knows the numbers of what else? He has them numbered, not just counted. Think about that. They're all identified by a number to him. And so every morning, you take that shower, and some of them, and there goes, 492 and 688 down the drain today, huh? So the water, this is water being made bitter. There was a time in Israel's history, they're on this Exodus journey. It took a long time, didn't it? And they're essentially in the 6th stop. Mara was the name of the place, the name of the water. And there the water was bitter. And God, and cast into it was a tree that God sent along. And the water became sweet. So that is a sign. What happened back there in Exodus, that's Exodus 15, was a sign, a symbol of a picture of the grace that comes through the cross of Jesus Christ. A tree being cast in, and quite often the cross is referred to as hung on a tree, cast into the water to be made sweet. And that's what the cross does for people when they accept it, doesn't it? It makes it a sweet thing. But here, in this instance, is God's judgment, because he's taking another object, casting it into the waters, and it's making it bitter. This judgment was predicted back in Jeremiah, chapter 9 and chapter 23 of Jeremiah. Chapter 9 says that they walked after the imagination of their own hearts, and he goes on to say, and I will feed them with wormwood. So back then when Jeremiah gave that, they probably thought that's an interesting prophecy. But here again, now we see how God is going to play all that out. And we just wonder if those people that are left behind are going to understand it. I remember as a boy, maybe Pastor McQueen remembers this. I'm 58, so I'm probably a little older, or a lot older than you are, but there was a ministry or something that made up a picture of what the world would look like with the rapture taking place, people coming up out off the earth. And in there, they embedded in the display a VHS tape. There was a sermon, I don't know who it was a sermon of someone preaching the storyline of Revelation. And it was meant to leave on your wall, so when all your relatives that aren't saved come over to look for you, oh, he's one of those. I wonder how that works. It invites them to take the tape out and watch it. I thought that's pretty clever. I looked a while back to see if any of those were showing up on eBay, and I couldn't find them. But it'd be interesting to have something like that, huh? Because who's going to, of course, you're saying VHS, who has one of those? Yeah. You do. There we go. We need somebody that has a record. Anybody have a record player? Jody has one. They are. Bob has some old records from Akron Baptist Temple, the quartets that used to sing. And he asked me one day about seeing if he could put on something more modern, like 8-track. Not actually. More like CD or something. And I looked around for a record player, but you're right. I see them for sale in stores now on it. And then I guess that's a big thing. So don't give away your vinyls. Sell them to the pawn shops or something. So So this is predicted in Jeremiah because of people's idolatry. And that essentially is still going on today in just different forms, it seems like. But what happened here was that this affected the rivers and the subterranean waters there. It said many men died because of these waters. It affected the aquifer, it affected the fresh water supply. And so this is a symbolism of here's people who have rejected the water of life. Who is who? Remember Jesus to the Samaritan woman? I'll give you water that you'll never thirst again. They rejected the waters of life, and now the water they think they have that is good will no longer be good for them. And it will result in a number of people dying. In fact, the name wormwood means bitter herb that is totally poisonous there. And according to Lehman Strauss, a commentator from a number of years ago, he wrote that on March 21st, 1823, a volcanic explosion in some islands caused the water to become bitter, so bitter as to be unfit for use. So you just never know, how God's going to deal with that. So we move on to trumpet number 4. This is in verse 12 and 13. And the fourth angel sounded, and the third part of the sun was smitten, and the third part of the moon, and the third part of the stars, so as the third part of them was darkened, and the day shone not for the third part of it, and night likewise. And I beheld and heard an angel flying through the midst of heaven, saying with a loud voice, Woe, 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 to the inhabitants of the earth by the reason of other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels which were yet to sound. Kind of interesting thing going on, and that verse may answer a question that was posed last week. We'll get to in a moment here. Now, there's 4, that makes the 4th trumpet. And it seems to be the same way with the seals. There's 4 given, and then there's this interlude, or this pause, so to speak. Now, with the previous seal judgments, you had the introduction of the Antichrist with the first one, going to conquer, war with the second one, famine with the third one. The fourth one was a fourth of the people and animals would die. And then there was kind of an interlude with the 5th one because the action went from earth to heaven with the martyrs under the altar, asking what? How long will you not avenge our blood? And God didn't rebuke them for not having that spirit of forgiveness. A therapeutic thing that some people say, that I'll just forgive them so I feel better, but that's not what forgiveness is about. Forgiveness is about a reconciled relationship, isn't it? And so Jesus didn't say don't feel that way, because he told us to turn our need for vengeance over to him. Well, he will repay. He just said, wait, be patient. There's more that have to die. And then it goes on to do the 6th seal, which was the great earthquake, the stars fall, the mountains and islands move. And then the 7th seal introduced these judgments. So here we have 4 seals, or 4 trumpets rather, that are grouped together, and then there's this little interlude up here. This trumpet judgment caused what in verse number 12? A dimming of the heavens, essentially. The sun lost a third part of its force, can we say, smitten. The moon, which they would think of as a light source, and it is for us too, a third part, the stars, a third part, and it makes it clear to say it was darkened, and a day shone not for a third part of it, and the night likewise. Now think about what that does, a reduction in solar energy as such. Number one, people are going to regret those solar panels, ever getting them. You know, we've been told green. Okay, well, we found out one of these other judgments, much of the earth will be scorched. So much for that. Someone ought to probably sit down with AOC, take her through this. And then now we have the waters not being usable. Now we have less sunlight, and that certainly is going to affect the growing of things. And so this is a sign, this darkness is a sign of judgment. In the Old Testament, darkness was always a symbol seems of judgment that had come. And even in the New Testament, it talks about at night, sometimes people do things, drunk in the night, or mischievous in the night, or rioting in the night as such. And even in our own crime statistics. Just read the paper. Most bad things don't happen between 11 and 1 during the day. It happens between 1 and 4 in the morning. And so that's why they don't get up till 6 noon, because they are out doing their deeds on that. And it seems like, I don't know if you do much of reading the Salt Lake News, but it seems like most of those bad things happen at night, and most all of them are connected with alcohol and drugs, it seems like. Alcohol and drugs. You always, at the end of the article, it seems to contribute that as a factor. So if you saw the first 4 seals, God cut short the food supply. Let me start over. The 4 trumpet judgments. God cut short the food supply with the first one. He disrupted the distribution because of the ships and so forth. The water's poisoned. We just saw that. The means of production is dimmed because less of this sun. So that's why you're going to see later on, God is going to feed those Jews that have escaped to the mountains, because food is going to be hard to come by. Remember back in the seal judgments, a measure of money, a large amount of money would buy a small amount of wheat, a measure of wheat, what would basically feed you for one day. One day's wage could buy 1 meal for you. Now, think about that. Most of us probably don't spend that much money on groceries now, huh? So you'll see these last 3 judgments that are going to start. And these are judgments upon human beings. The first was judgments upon the earth itself that would affect human beings. But these next trumpet judgments are judgments upon the humans themselves. But look at that verse 13, because that may answer a question. Because the question was what? Will people be able to hear, the unsaved on earth, will they be able to hear the trumpets when they sound? Now, on its face, I would want to say yes, because obviously trumpets are given to announce something. But sometimes we like to think a little deeper than that and say, well, is that really a fact, or is that something that's assumed? Well, look at verse 13. And I beheld, and I heard an angel flying through the midst of the heavens, saying with a loud voice, Woe, woe, woe to the inhabitants of the earth by the reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels which are yet to come. Kind of interesting, as I was studying this verse, I don't know how I noticed it. Maybe I was Googling, and a quote from the NIV came up with this verse. And also, it was probably Bible Hub, where you put a verse in, and it will show you about 8 or 10 or 12 different translations of the same verse. So I probably was looking for something and came across that, because I think the ESV does the same thing. They say, and likewise, and heard an eagle flying through. They changed it to eagle. I thought that's interesting. If you look at it, and if you look at the underlying document behind our Bible, Authorized Version, it's angel. And it's the other times angel is included in this text in Revelation, all comes from that same underlying word. But when you look at what underlies those modern versions, which are what they call minority texts, these are Alexandrian texts that have been corrupted, they have the word eagle. That's interesting. I thought, so I know which one's right, because I know this book is right. But what else would you use to show somebody that it really is an angel and not an eagle? Well, think about this. All the other announcements, all the other messages have been angels. Now, there is 2 times in Revelation that the eagle is used. 2 times. One time, it's found in chapter 4, verse 7, when it describes the 4 beasts like different animals. The first was like a lion, and the second was like a calf, and the third was like the face of a man, and the fourth was like a flying eagle. But the eagle there is not doing anything than what an eagle does, the symbolism it uses. It's flying. Okay? The only other time eagle's used in the scripture, or in Revelation rather, is Revelation chapter 12 and verse 14. We're so close we might as well just sneak over there. 12:14. Now this is where things are getting bad. And so those folks who have, God is protecting the Israel essentially, the woman and her children. In verse 14 it says, "And to the woman were given 2 wings of a great eagle, that she might fly into the wilderness, into her place, where she is nourished for a time, and times, and half a time." Now time represents a year. So time would be 1 year. Times would be 2 years to make 3. And a half a time would be 3.5 years. That's halfway through the tribulation. "From the face of the serpent. And the serpent cast out of his mouth water as a flood after the woman, that he might cause her to be carried away with the flood. And the earth helped the woman, and the earth opened her mouth and swallowed up the flood which the dragon cast out of his mouth. And the dragon was wroth with the woman, and went to make war with the remnant of her seed, the Jewish people, which kept the commandments of God and had the testimony of Jesus Christ." Now the eagle that's described to help her is not talking to her. He's not announcing anything. He's doing what? It's symbolism of wings of an eagle. So this is a transportation type of thing again. So there's no time in the Bible where eagles are used to tell men anything. So it would be very out of character to say, oh, that's an eagle in chapter number 8, because some corrupted text told us to change it to eagle. And we know that's not the case there. Nowhere in Revelation is eagle function in this comparable way. Nowhere in Revelation is the presence of the eagle mentioned, beside those 2 we given to you. And no other apocalyptic material like Ezekiel, Jeremiah, Isaiah, those revelations, is an eagle mentioned with a similar incident here. So nowhere in the Bible does an eagle perform anything other than it's just its natural state. So logically, just good study, you would reject that translation of it. But we know, because God has preserved his word, that we can just offhand, out of hand, reject it. So now we move to chapter 9. Chapter 9. Oh, yes, thank you. That's I went a long way around. Okay, well, what do you think? Verse number 13. Don't go to chapter 9 yet. We'll back up for a moment. So obviously the people on earth, the inhabitants of the earth, are hearing the woe, woe, woe. It talks about it, to the inhabitants of the earth. Now, why are they saying the woe, woe, woe? By the reason, or for the reason of the other voices of the trumpet of the 3 angels which are yet to come. So that gives us a clue that not only are they going to hear the woe, 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 it's just like a preview, but they're going to hear the trumpet, the voices of the trumpet that were given. I mean, would you stake your life on that interpretation? Maybe an arm or a leg on it, but I wouldn't say I'm going to split fellowship with someone over that thought. But there seems to be evidence that with the way trumpets are used, with the way this angel that's flying through, the voice could be heard, it seems to show that, yes, the voices of the trumpets that are yet to be heard, or yet to be sounded. So I would say yes, but I wouldn't argue with anyone who would come up with no on it. So chapter 9. Thanks for reminding me to answer the question. Almost sounds like I was in one of those interrogations. You go, answer your question. You've said everything but the answer. So verse number 1. Before we start looking at verse 1, chapter 9 is probably one of the most debated chapters as far as symbolism. The question to be asked is this chapter to be taken literally or symbolically? And it's asked because it talks about descriptions of locusts and of horsemen. So the question is well, is the locust literal locusts, or is the locust symbolic for some other sense, like a group of people or some other thing? Well, we approach the Bible, interpreting the Bible, and what's in a literal way. We approach it in a historical, grammatical way. We try to let words say what they mean to say. We take it literal unless it's really shown to be symbolic, wanting us to be symbolic, because Jesus used certain things to teach literal truths with symbolic things. So even though there's symbols used, it doesn't change the fact that the teaching is a literal teaching. That it's a literal event. It's a literal thing that's going to happen. Now, how do we know that from this chapter? Well, let's look at a couple identifying key words. Chapter 9, verse 5. And to them it was given that they should not kill, but they should be tormented 5 months, and their torment was... No, you missed a word. Was as. It says the same thing in verse 7, same thing in verse 8, same thing in verse 9, same thing in verse number 17, as. So that's one thing. It's not saying it is, but it's like it. We call that simile. It's a device we use in language today, don't we? Simile is where you use a figure of speech to compare things. And it's not meant to be a literal comparison as such, but to compare a quality of it. Now, for instance, look at verse number 7. And the shapes of the locusts were like unto horses. It's interesting that word like is there. Okay. Look at verse number 9. And by the way, like unto is in verse 7, 10, and 19. So it's used several times. Verse 9. And they had breastplates, as it were breastplates of iron, as it were breastplates of iron, as it were, right? And on down in the verse, and the sound of their wings was as the sound of the chariots. Look in verse number 7 and 9, use those. So we have as, like unto, and as it were, all figures of speech. So we approach this chapter as it's a literal truth, literal teaching, that is using some figures of speech to help us understand. It's going to talk about like the sting of a scorpion. I've never been stung by one. Anyone here stung by a scorpion? Nobody? I mean, we find them all the time out here, don't we? We had the Robinsons staying with us when we were out in Vermilion Cliffs in that rental home, and we hadn't been there very long, and she brings out this scorpion she found in the bedroom they were staying in. I was glad it was in the guest bedroom. And she says, you may want to call the exterminator. And then she says, but we're not real afraid of them because in Mexico, we have ones that are a lot worse. She said she got stung by one, ended up in the hospital for a few days. So if you wanted to get across how bad something was going to be, like I'm going to beat you up and it's going to feel like you were hit with a Mack truck. Now, obviously, you're not going to get hit with a Mack truck, but it's going to feel like you were. And that's the case here. So amillennialism, remember in the beginning of this, I told you there was pre, post, and amillennial, which means what people believe about when the millennial would be. So premillennial, we believe that Jesus will come back to start the millennium, before the millennium, to start the millennium. Post-millennium says man's efforts are going to improve the world. And everybody's going to come to Jesus. It's going to be such a wonderful place. At the end of that 1,000 years, then Jesus, post, will come back and set up his kingdom. Now, that scenario is not working out so well now with the news and everything. There were a lot more amillennials before the World War I and II. Now, there's one called amillennialist. A means not, right? They don't believe there's actually 1,000 years. That's a figurative term they mean for a period of things happening. So the amillennialist would often say, oh, this plague of locusts, that is symbolic of the Baptist heretics that will come along, or Islam that will come along, or the Judists that will come along, or the Presbyterians or Protestants and so forth. So they never took it as literal. And that's the hard thing with Scripture, is if you don't take it literally, where do you stop taking the figurative interpretation? I mean, how far does that go? So let's look at these verses, 1 through 6 in chapter 9. And the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven unto the earth, and to him that was given, and to him was given the key of the bottomless pit. And he opened the bottomless pit, then there arose a smoke out of the pit, as the smoke of a great furnace. And the sun and the air were darkened by the reason of the smoke of the pit. And there came out of the smoke locusts upon the earth. And unto them was given power, as the scorpions of the earth have power. And it was commanded them that they should not hurt the grass of the earth, neither any green thing, neither any tree, but only those men which have not the seal of God in their foreheads. Now, who had the seal of God in their foreheads? 144,000. And we know those aren't the Jehovah's Witnesses. Those are 12,000 from each of the tribes. Yeah. What verse? Okay, verse 5. And to them it was given that they should not kill them, but that they should be tormented 5 months. And their torment was as the torment of a scorpion when he striketh a man. And in those days shall men seek death, and shall not find it, and shall desire to die, and death shall flee from them. So let's stop at that point and take that first part of it. Because he's talking about this star falling from heaven. Now, interesting, is this star meant to be taken literal? Because there were some that were literal, right? Well, let's use this thing of the technique of the language. Let's read it again. Verse 1, and the fifth angel sounded, and I saw a star fall from heaven upon the earth, and to him. Who's the him? The star. Unto the star was given the key to the bottomless pit. In verse 2, and he, the star, opened the bottomless pit. So he is, to the star is being prescribed personal pronouns and personal acts. So the star is not to be taken as a literal star, but rather as an angel. In fact, earlier in Revelation, when it talks about in Revelation chapter 1, it talks about the 7 stars are the angels of the 7 churches. So there, it clearly defines using stars to mean angels. So you say, well, how do we know if that star means an angel? Well, we look at what a star can and cannot do. Can a star receive a key? No, but an angel could. We've seen that. Can a star open the bottomless pit? No. So we would see that star is using symbolic language for an angel, because we've already been told that in the first chapter of Revelation. That's how it can work, that a star is sometimes identified as an angel. So that, well, it's...
Is it possible that the star could possibly be Satan because he controls the bottomless pit?
Let's see. Point 2. The star is Satan. Did you read my notes? You probably Googled and found the exact same thing that I stole off the internet, huh? That's a good observation. And yes, the answer to that is yes. And it was the next thing. In fact, the name, what was another name for Satan?
Several names.
Well, give me some of them. Okay, Lucifer. Okay, that's what we want. Devil, that kind of. Lucifer means day star. Day star. So you have there, obviously, a connection, don't you? And this star was cast into where? Well, cast first what?
Onto the earth.
Onto the earth. Now, is there any clue in the rest of Revelation, or anywhere else in the Bible, that Satan is prophesied to be cast to earth? Well, obviously there is. Isaiah chapter 14 talks about it. John talked about it. Look in chapter 12 for a moment. Chapter 12. This is our last thing, because we're going to need to finish up with this. John 12:7. And there was a war in heaven. John 12:7. Revelation. And there was a war in heaven. Michael and his angels fought against the dragon. That's one of his names, wasn't it? Did I mean a literal dragon, like we know of the rock art and dinosaurs we seem to be? And the dragon fought against his angels and prevailed not, neither was their place found any more in heaven. And the great dragon was cast out, that old serpent, called the devil and Satan, which deceiveth the whole earth, and was cast out into the earth, and his angels were cast out with him. So that shows us that Satan is serving now as the what of the earth, the god of this world, small g god of this world. In doing that, his principality extends over some of the other powers that are the powers of the air, the Bible describes about, demonic powers and whatnot. And it shows in Job that he has access to heaven. Satan has access to heaven. And the Bible talks about he's accusing us day and night. It also shows that he has access to earth with Job. He would, and in 1 Peter 5:8 talks about he walketh about as a roaring lion. So he has access to heaven, has access to earth, and he has some principality over. So this would fit that this great star that goes through to the bottomless pit is in fact Satan, and we're going to find out next week about what this key does and what he lets out of the bottomless pit during the tribulation. And it is not, as we've already sampled, a pleasant experience for anybody, that's going to be there. So if you're not saved, let's get her done, because you don't have to wait to the end to experience this. If you leave this life because your life stops, then you'll start experiencing some of hell, or all of hell, some of this stuff in that all of hell. Let's finish up with a word of prayer, and we'll get ready for the morning service. Father, thank you today for the rich scriptures we have. We just open it up and trust it, Father. Not only does it tell a great history, but it tells, Father, well, a great future for us, horrible for those that don't know your Son. Father, may our duty, our passion be to tell others of your Son and persuade them in the highways and hedges to come in to him and receive him so that they too can be saved from the wrath to come. Bless us in the morning service to come. May we open our mouths with praise to you in good hearty amens. We thank you for Jesus, our Savior, all the time.